Thank you so much for
Thanks for having me.
sitting down with me. You got your start at a comedy club.
Are we going already?
Yeah.
Painless transition. Go right ahead, my friend. Go ahead.
You got your start at a comedy club, but you were working it, not actually like performing.
Right. In 1987, I was supposed to graduate in '87, but had to take another lap, so I didn't graduate till '88. And I only did that because my grandmother guilted me into, I want to see one of my grandchildren walk the stage. Oh, yeah, I got to put another year in. But I did, and then I got a job towards the end of my 12th grade year at a place called Bonkers Comedy Club in Orlando, Florida, and my first job was vacuuming the showroom floor, cleaning the bathrooms, and that kind of stuff. But at least it put me in the environment I wanted to be in. I was from that old school where my dad would just go get around it. You'll figure it out, but go get around it, and that was my way in. So.
And I had a similar experience. I worked at Comics Cafe as a busboy,
Sure.
and I talked to the comedians afterwards, and I joked because almost every one of them told me not to get into this business. But you did.
I did. No, I always wanted to do it, and I was lucky because my dad was fully behind it. My dad turned me on to, my dad had that great comedy record collection growing up that some of us were lucky enough to experience. He had Carlson and Pryor and Newhart and Dick Gregory and all these great comics, and he would listen to those albums with me. And then, my dad was a great film buff. My dad's dream was to be an animator, and he never got to realize his dream. And so when he saw me starting to spark towards wanting to be a performer, he was completely behind me. He was the only one in the family that was like, yes, you can do this. And so I just never, I never looked back on that.
That had to help, right?
It helped tremendously, especially growing up where I did. You either became you either became a cop, a fireman, or you worked at a factory, or you were a criminal. Those were your four occupations. And the idea of becoming a performer just really always felt good to me. And like I said, my dad was behind it. When I first started, I was working at a warehouse in the back of a place called Zayre's, which was a precursor to Target, just loading pallets for the stock crew and stuff. And my mom was like, if you just work that job for another 10 years, you'll be fine and be vested. And I was like, I don't think that's for me. But my pop was always like, yeah, get out there and do it. He goes, chase your dream, chase your dream.
It took you a while for the big break though, right?
It did, man. I started in '87. That was my first open mic night. And then I did the road for about 8-9 years. Then I moved to California in '96. And then did another 10 years out there. And then I guess after 22 years, I was an overnight success,
What happened?
I got lucky, man. I think your craft, the harder you work on it, is how long your window will stay open. But the actual break is like an act of the universe and God. Everything has to line up. And I was actually at a place where it was not going well. I mean, I hadn't booked anything in a couple years, was having trouble getting booked as a stand-up. And I decided I was gonna hang in LA for one more pilot season, which used to be like a 3-month period where you'd try to audition for new shows and hope they got picked up. And in that period of that last pilot season, there was like 6 auditions I had, I think, and Mike and Molly was the last one. And Chuck Lorre just changed everything for me. Like, he saw something in me and said, I think you're the guy. And that guy seems to know it. I think he's going to make it.
Yeah, he's going to be okay. What was it like to suddenly have fame?
It was, with Mike and Molly, it was just such a rare thing because we had Chuck Lorre producing us, and the legendary director Jimmy Burrows directed us for the first 2 years, who directed Cheers and Friends, and I mean, legendary people around me. It's like the greatest college I could have gone to. And it took a minute to get used to that. And I always just treat it with the idea that it's still my job. It's just a job. It's a job. If you get away from that, you're in trouble. And I was lucky enough to be married with a kid, so I had something that was always more important to me than business. So I figured if I got out of there safe, I looked at it like I was going to the steel mill. Punch in, punch out, go home safe. That was how I kind of ran it. And I'm a guy that I guess if I would have been a little more publicity seeking, I'd have probably been a little bit of a bigger star. But you know what? I got exactly what I needed, and I'm very grateful for it. And I kept it kind of low key, which I like.
Was it an interesting experience for your son to grow up as your star rose?
I made a conscious choice early on to just leave my wife and kid to themselves. And we made a choice as a family to when I'm in public, I'll take a picture with anybody, I'll shake hands with anybody, because look, they bought my house. They're the reason my kid got braces. I understand that I owe them that. And I try to be genuine and generous about that. But I tried to keep them as private as possible, just so he had a normal childhood, and it ended up being a great choice. And then now he's 21 and he's in film school and he wants to run away to the circus like I did. So I'm rooting for him, like my dad rooted for me. And so, but I think you start that journey at 18, 19. I think that's the time to start this journey.
Full circle.
Yeah.
So I have trouble understanding what's wrong with stand-up comedians, because they make it like Gilbert Gottfried, Tim Meadows, and then they end up in Rochester, New York, entertaining us, which I'm grateful for. It's just interesting to see that.
I had that very thing happen to me. During the second year of Bob Hart's Abishola, and I got to do 2 sitcoms, which who gets to do that? I mean, unbelievable. But I needed to get healthy. I was in some health danger, and from my weight, and I had type 2 diabetes and stuff, I just had to put a pause in it. So I just said, I'm gonna stop, because otherwise this is all gonna be for nothing. So I stopped and got healthy, and in that 3 years, I thought, all right, I'm done with stand-up. I think I've made my peace with it, And then I had a couple friends, Steve Byrne and Ian Bagg and Leno and Alonzo Bowden and Christopher Titus, and they just kept, and of course my mentor Ben Creed, who's with me this week, they kept saying, you gotta get back up, or you gotta get back. And I'm like, yeah, I think I'm good. And then I went down to see my friend Ian Bagg with my wife in Irvine at the Improv, and he was having one of those nights where he was just lighting the place on fire. And whatever that twitch is that a stand-up gets, it hit me again. And I started messing around with open mic nights, and I started to rediscover how much I loved it. And there was so much different about me now, being in a different physical form, having had different experiences, that it became creatively fun again. And so I like these kind of clubs. This is an independently run club. They're my favorite because it's what I came up in. And I just started to kind of rediscover why I loved it. And then I started finding the things I wanted to talk about again. And then all of a sudden, I'm out on the road again doing 4 for the weekend. And, I really enjoy it again. I still get a big kick out of making people laugh. And it's really come down to that. After all of it, that is still a joy to me. Plus, gives my wife a break from me 3 or 4 days, twice a month. So it's nice.
You get 2 things out of it. What type of comedy can people expect?
Well, with me, I try to talk about connective tissue, because I think we're in a place where we're a little too combative with each other, and everybody can pick their own style. That's what I love about comedy. It's like jazz. You play your notes. And my thing is, I've always talked about what's going on in my life. And so my new hour forming that I'm working for a special, hopefully next year, is first of all about my weight loss and what it takes to get healthy at an age after 50, which is no easy journey. And then I spend some time talking about this generation in a good way. I think these kids need to know there's an adult rooting for them. And I got one of them, so I'm defending these kids. They're up against a lot more than we realize. And so I want them to know I'm rooting for them, and I like to compare our childhoods, but not in a way that we were better than you. It's different circumstance, but hey, let me help you out. And then I talk about being married for 25 years and being in the sweet spot. My wife and I have made it to the point where we're gonna be to the end of the line now, which is a good thing. And then the last part of my show is about my father, who was probably my biggest hero.
I love that.
Yeah.
Has it been difficult to be in the public spotlight during such a giant health journey?
Man, not really. I went to Chuck Lorre before the 3rd season of Bob Hart's Abishola started, and I said, I'm going to do something drastic. I'm going to get bariatric surgery because I got to get this weight off me. And Chuck was, we'd worked together for so long. He goes, do what you got to do. I want you around as long as possible. So he was incredibly supportive. Plus, Bob Hart's Abishola started, like Mike and Molly, Mike was always going to be big. But with Bob, the show starts with me having a heart attack, so sometimes art imitates life. And his journey is to get healthy, so it kind of matched the show anyway. But Chuck said either way, it wouldn't matter. But for the show, he would just put in little things in the script, like, looking good, Bob. Oh, you eating a salad, Bob. And so that audience from that show kind of watched me get smaller, which was fine. And then now I've kind of got my anonymity back because I made myself unrecognizable. I hadn't done stand-up in 3 years. And so, like I said, I got them right where I want them, and it's like starting a band over, but you already know how to play guitar. Yeah. So it's been kind of cool.
That's great. What was it like to watch Melissa McCarthy rise into stardom?
Man, I'm such a fan. You know, she was like my sister on that show. Me and Melissa, when we read together for the audition, everybody in the room knew right away. Like, you could just feel it. Like, this is just correct. And that whole cast was like that. And when she became a movie star, the 3rd season of Mike and Molly, man, we couldn't have been more happy for her, you know. And she stayed herself through all of that. And I give her such kudos for that. And you know what, man, I got to tell you, working with her was such a learning experience and a treat, because she's a powerhouse, man. An absolute powerhouse. I was always good at the funny stuff from being a comic, but doing those tender scenes, like, she made that so safe and trusting, and it just became a practice field for becoming a good actor. And I give her credit. Of course, Lou Mastillo, who played Vince on the show, guy talks like this. Dude, he's a Broadway guy, so I've learned from him, and he was a big influence. And then Rondi Reed, who played my mother from Steppenwolf in Chicago. So I was surrounded by a pedigree of people. And then, of course, Reno Wilson, who trained at the Fame School in New York, who's a dear friend. And like, these people made me a great actor. They really learning, because I didn't go in there thinking I went in there like, how do I do this? Right. And those people, they really surrounded me. Chuck said at the beginning, he goes, I'm not gonna put all this on you. I'm gonna surround you with a group of talented people, and you're gonna carry the water up the hill together. And that really became the bonding thing of that show. And I love all that. Like, we still have a monthly lunch where we all get together and laugh about how old we're getting and how lucky we were. But that was a spectacular experience. But I became a better actor because of those people.
You seem very grateful. I
am grateful, man. I could have gone the other way, and I am grateful. I had a little bit of a spiritual awakening around 2010, and then ironically, that's when the show took off, and I realized that, man, I have just been blessed beyond. And so to be able to come out now and try to make people laugh again has become, like, at the beginning of my career, it was like, look at me, look at me, look at me, which we all go into that way. But now I kind of try to view it as service. Like, if I'm making you laugh and we're forgetting our problems for an hour, my work here is done.
I love that.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
No, man, come down and see me. There's a few tickets left, not many. We're having a good week here in Rochester. I always want to say Rochester. There's no D in that word, and I hear Rochester. What I hear is Rochester, which is a very old reference. Google it. Anyway, no, I still find the joy in being able to bring us together. It's a reminder that we can all be together for a minute, just for a minute, and I think that's worth doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for your time, man. I appreciate you.